Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And as we frequently talk about with some of my guests, you say the word sales and people go, ew, we don't want to be salesmen, blah, woo, ah. But then the next thing that we make faces at is bookkeeping, accounting. We don't want to have to do any of that because, it confuses us. We're not good at math. Why do we have to do this? I got money in the bank, all of those things. But please join me in welcoming today's expert, Nolan Bradbury, today, because Nolan is going to show us how to make accounting not suck for small businesses. Welcome, Nolan. How are you?
I'm well. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing hunky-dory. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So Nolan Bradbury is the founder of Bradfield Accounting and Advisory. He is a seasoned financial professional who is passionate about helping business owners achieve their dreams. Leaning into 2 decades of experience in both the public and private sectors, he helps entrepreneurs minimize the unknown and remove operational uncertainty from the equation so they can concentrate on what they do best, lose less sleep, and increase profitability and cash flow. So again, Nolan, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I always like to know how it is that my guests got to where they are today. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I am a CPA by trade. So I went to school, got a degree in accounting, got a master's in accounting, very cool, sexy things as you can tell. But I did not go to college to be a CPA.
Right.
I actually went to college to major in psychology. And I say that because that had a very large influence on my job as a professional in the accounting realm. You probably hear that as we talk through things. Post-college, I worked in large accounting firms, public accounting firms, very large clients. But after a while, I found that what I was doing just kind of felt like a necessary evil and didn't really fulfill me professionally. So I moved into the private sector and I did that for a while. And I really enjoyed that. I took a company public, but again, kind of felt like the work I was doing was kind of necessary evil. And so the last 12, 13 years, I've been working exclusively with small businesses to help them achieve the dreams and goals they have, not just for the business, but ultimately for the people behind the business, which is usually the founder and their family.
Right. I love it. I love it. And it's funny, years ago, my grandmother used to collect cartoons, right? When you actually got the paper and she would cut them out. And I remember she gave me one time, and I don't know why she gave it to me and not the other grandchildren, but it said, well, I can't be overdrawn. I still have checks. And I thought, that's the philosophy of a lot of business owners, right? I think I still have money, in the bank, but they don't really sit down and actually be strategic about their financial planning. And that's an awful lot of what you do.
Yes. Yeah. You mentioned at the top, my goal is to make accounting not suck. And that's because what I've learned over the years is that, accounting is, and there's surveys that prove this, it's like the number one thing that most business owners hate the most.
Right.
It's the thing that they don't enjoy. And I get it. Right. I'm a CPA, but I'm not ignorant to the fact that it's not the most enjoyable thing.
So then we don't do it.
It's exactly right. So human behavior says things we don't enjoy, we avoid, or we don't do, right? But most people also understand that, even though they feel that way, it's still an important part of their business. And so there's this love, hate, or love, respect relationship that exists. And what we try to do is help understand what the barrier is to that feeling, solve that, so that we can actually have, silly as it sounds, a good positive relationship with the numbers of our business. Because otherwise, what we end up doing is basically bank statement accounting, which is we look at what's on our bank balance and we go, well, that's
Have
what I
I
can
got money this month?
I got
Okay.
money right now. I can go spend it. And there's no sort of strategic analysis of what do I have to pay and what should I be using that money for? Should I be saving it? Should I be investing it? And ultimately, what ends up happening is when you don't make just decisions based upon data, or at least know what the data says, we make intuition-based decisions.
Right.
And that can be good and get us to a certain point, but at some point it will fail us in terms of our goals overall.
Right. And this is purely anecdotal, but my feeling is most of the businesses that failed during COVID were because people had not done financial planning. And granted, there are an awful lot of businesses, just like there are an awful lot of people that are kind of paycheck to paycheck, right?
Yes.
But we can get away from that. And I think that's something, again, whether it's individual or as a business, we have got to be planning for the oopses of the world. Hopefully we don't have a COVID again, but you might have an emergency, or you might have something way cool that you want to purchase, or whatever. So when should we actually start doing our financial planning?
Yeah, it's a great question. Then the CPA in me would say always, right? But
right, the day you start your business, if not before.
Practically speaking, like, I understand that that's not always the case. I think that there is a delineation between what you're using the financials for to some extent. So if your sole purpose is for, say, tax compliance, like you just need to prepare it, like the emphasis you place upon the way the numbers are used and aggregated maybe diminishes, at least at smaller scale. Now, obviously, as you get bigger, there's greater risk that goes along with that. But I think when you start to view the business as something that you want to grow and that you want to treat more as an asset and not just a checking account, if you're looking to again, be strategic in how you go about running the business, the reality is you can't escape the need for that information, because fundamentally every decision that you're going to make comes back to, unfortunately, can you afford it? And that sounds like a really simple question, but it's more complex than that if you want to be strategic about it.
Right. And it really does start at the very beginning. I started my business, which is Wise Women Communications, 25, 30 years ago. I should know that date, right? But and I talked with several people, business advisors before then, and one of the best pieces of advice that I got, anyhow, to me, was they said, set up your business. Now, yes, set up a business, go through the Secretary of State, do all of the legalities, all of that stuff. But they said, set up your bank account in a totally different bank than your personal stuff, so that it's actually difficult to commingle funds. And of course, the worst thing is for the people who don't set up a business account at all. And so it was that it seems like that was good advice, but is that something that really, a lot of people don't end up doing?
So I'll answer that in two parts, I guess.
Okay.
So I would say most businesses, majority, at least the ones I come across with, they know enough to know and have taken the steps to have a distinct bank account for the business. So that's a great first step. I think that I would say, though, at the same time, a lot of businesses utilize the same bank as their personal information.
It's easier.
It's easier. There's a convenience to it. There's the most common reason is there's a familiarity. They probably just could click a few buttons online and open all the information up. As to whether or not that was good advice, I'll tell you what I tell most people is if it helps you out, then it was good.
It was good advice, right?
To some extent, right? Like the analogy I always give to people is that, what is the right diet for you? The one you'll stick to. What is the best workout plan? The one you'll follow. So if that's the thing that helps you respect those boundaries, then absolutely it was great advice. Does everyone need that? Not necessarily, but we all have our areas where we're going to need a little bit more support. And for some people, it is the commingling of funds and having them be not just separate bank accounts, but separate banks can be a good way. There are also some long-term advantages, which is you develop banking relationships in various areas, and different banks have different strengths. Some of them are very personal based. Some of them
Right.
are very business based.
Hmm.
And if you ever needed a loan or any sort of
Hmm.
financing or support, having different banking
Hmm.
relationships can be valuable that you can
Hmm.
leverage as opposed
Right.
to a singular source
Hmm.
of support.
Hmm. Right. Well, and of course, when I set my stuff up, it was long enough ago that you knew the people in the bank. There was not this online thing. I mean, you had to go in and talk to them, and you develop those relationships, and that's kind of where it's a challenge now.
Yeah.
But it is possible. It was funny. I was talking about that over the weekend with somebody where we talked about, and it does tend to be obviously the smaller banks, or maybe it's one personal or business. You just go in fairly often and they recognize you. And my mother passed away earlier this year, and I am the sole heir. And so little tiny bank in Kansas, and I went in, talked to him. I was already a signer on the account. My mother was one of these really planning people. I mean, it
Right.
was very nice. I was, it was very easy to do. But there have been some things through the months where like I got a check that I needed to deposit into her account. And and I've just been doing that, like a refund from her apartment, whatever it is, just to kind of keep stuff a little bit separate. I really don't need to, but I didn't endorse it right.
Hmm.
They called
Oh, wow.
and
That's
said, "Hey,
impressive.
Deb, this is what you need to do."
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm probably going to close the account later on, before the end of the year, and just get everything into a account, that is mom's money. But I miss that personal touch, and I think that's something that we all, the certain generations behind me, they don't even know what I'm talking about, but my generation really got used to that. You'd walk in, they call you by name, they knew your dog's name, all of those various things.
Yeah, it's funny. Technology, all those things, they have tremendous benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no doubt that, like, if you're working a normal job and you're trying to start
Mm-hmm.
a side gig, that being able to log onto a bank after your normal day of
Mm-hmm.
hours and do
Right.
something is not tremendously beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also say that most businesses at some point along the way needed the help of a human being.
Mm-hmm.
They needed
Mm-hmm.
someone that they could
Mm-hmm.
call. And it is unfortunate because a lot of people, when I talk to them, like, oh, do you have a banker?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Right.
Or
They have to even stop and think, what bank am I at?
yeah. And it's not exclusive
Mm-hmm.
to banks. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
pick an industry, pick a
Right.
profession.
Mm-hmm.
How often do we really have a relationship
Mm-hmm.
with the professional that
Right.
you've hired or
Mm-hmm.
work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in most cases, we tend to view it as a transaction.
Mm-hmm.
I pay you this, you give me
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's true,
Mm-hmm.
but if that's how you view it,
Mm-hmm.
if you ever need more than that, it may not be
Right.
set up to support you in that way.
Mm-hmm. Right. You're just a number to them. You're
Yep.
obviously an account number, and that's it.
Yeah.
Um, and even the big chains obviously have specific people that are your business bankers, and for the most part they're there long term, so it is possible to develop relationships with them. And even if you just say hi at Christmas, that is something, because you're right, when we need something we
Yeah.
need to go to a person. And AI aside, there are times, and especially I think with numbers, and more than likely, if you're having to need that person, there might be an issue, and you really need to be talking with a person who is going to have empathy, who is going to understand, who's going to do whatever they can to help.
Yeah. Yeah. As a quick anecdote, right now we're doing an RFP for some software within my firm,
Mm-hmm.
and we reached out to a company, and it took 6 emails before we got an actual human response from
Mm-hmm.
the company. So
Mm-hmm.
everything was automated up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, I'm like, well, that's kind of impressive that you were able
Right.
to
Mm-hmm.
outsource as much.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I'm like, I really would have just liked to talk to a human being,
Mm-hmm.
like, at one
Mm-hmm.
point, because the question was not that complicated.
Right.
It just,
Mm-hmm.
the system didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
ability to respond in the way I
Mm-hmm.
needed to, or
Mm-hmm.
it was so much back and forth that it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't clear in these
Mm-hmm.
exchanges what the real issue was.
Right.
So, there's a place for it, but usually at the end of the day, there's a human element that
Mm-hmm.
tends to be able to get things
Mm-hmm.
across the finish line in a way
Mm-hmm.
right now AI or software
Mm-hmm.
can't.
Right. Yeah. One of my favorite, Facebook cartoons is always the one where somebody is screaming into the phone, person,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to talk to the automated system, or we're pounding on the zero key, right? Because that used to be, and of course now the systems are much smarter than that. It just hangs up on you.
Well, I think the thing, not to get too off topic here, but I think
Mhm.
one of the things I find most interesting is that as AI becomes more advanced and
Mhm.
ubiquitous, there's this idea that you have to teach AI how to not be AI. You have to teach
Right.
to be
Mhm.
human because
Mhm.
humans behave
Mhm.
irrationally.
Mhm.
And AI doesn't truly understand that,
Mhm.
right? And so a lot of the challenges that we
Mhm.
face right now with the technology is we don't behave in a patterned way. And
Mhm.
so the software doesn't really know how to
Right.
predict or
Yeah.
respond to that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, there's sort of these not like black swan events, but sort
Mhm.
of these micro things that are like,
Mhm.
well, that's not what the pattern says you
Mhm.
should do or think,
Mhm.
and yet
Right.
that's what we
Silly
do.
human.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm. Right. We'll follow this little rabbit trail for a little bit. I've started really learning how to use AI
Mhm.
for my business. I think it's especially as a solopreneur. I think it's a great tool to be able to do stuff. And I'm working with a woman who is an expert in it. She is incredibly intelligent about it, and it just astounds me with what she knows. And one of the things she said was, treat it like a human. So say good morning, please, thank you. And I've tested it. And the really bizarre thing is you get different answers. When you are polite to it and you thank it, you do get different answers. I was using it today, trying out this. I've got a bunch of graphics for that I have set up for my cancer initiative. Inspirational sayings, all of those things that I want posted on Facebook. Can I do that? Obviously, I've done it for months, gone in, posted one every day, but that takes time. And so I forget, I go a whole month without remembering. And so I was using the feature and I did. I said, good morning. How are you today? And it answered and it said, I'm doing really pretty well. How are you today?
Yeah.
So it's a little scary, right? I'm expecting to say, Dave, how are you today? Right. But like one of the and one of the things that someone told me, they said, keep asking it, do you have questions?
Mm.
Because it won't necessarily generate a question unless you're saying, hey, have I given you all the information you need? But of course it is only as good as the data that it's getting, right? So you could say, hey, what are the new financial guidelines? What's the new tax code? And it could go find great information or it could go find really inaccurate because it's only getting what's out there on the internet.
Yeah. The AI right now, it's all about the prompts and
Mm-hmm.
how good are you at
Right.
prompting the
Mm-hmm.
question and what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, that's the part that they haven't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily spent the
Right.
time on yet to
Right.
develop. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how much detail do I need to give?
Mm-hmm.
What is the information that I can
Mm-hmm.
share?
Right.
What is the background that it
Mm-hmm.
needs to really be able to
Mm-hmm.
answer this question as
Right.
thoroughly as I need it to be?
Yeah. Yeah. I asked mine, and I use a variety of different ones now, but I asked the one I said, looking for speaking opportunities for medical conferences in Georgia. And it came back with really good ones. And I thought, I don't recognize those towns. And I realized it came back with Georgia country, not Georgia state. And I'm like, oh no, don't want to go to Russia. And so then of course I modified the prompt.
Yeah.
And so, but that does, bring me to, how much of our accounting and our bookkeeping and things like that can we do with AI?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think it's improving every
Mhm.
day, if I'm being honest. Whether we realize it or not,
Mhm.
AI has actually been around for quite a while. Like
It has
it's just
anybody
been,
who says, hey,
yeah,
Siri.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or even, I mean, in ways that we didn't necessarily even
Mhm.
see in the way we
Mhm.
engage in it, right? It
Right.
was
Our
back in,
GPS was AI.
yeah. I mean, Intuit, which
Mhm.
owns QuickBooks, has
Mhm.
used a very
Mhm.
like
Right.
remedial version of
Mhm.
AI
Mhm.
for quite a while. It's
Mhm.
gotten better, obviously, as the technology has
Mhm.
improved. Um, I think that it will continue to get better, and there
Mhm.
will be places where it really does
Mhm.
take over probably 80 to
Mhm.
90% of certain parts of the roles
Mhm.
of the accounting. And that's
Mhm.
true, I think, for any
Right.
industry. It will
Mhm.
become really proficient at that.
Mhm.
And then I think there are going to be these pieces, though, that, excuse me, are not that it can't do, but that the human touch or human element is
Right.
going to
Yes.
like
Mhm.
enhance it. And I think, excuse me, the people who are getting the most out of AI or Chat GPT or however you want to
Mhm.
define it now are the ones who view it as a starting point.
Right.
It
Hmm.
provides the
Hmm.
basis. It provides
Hmm.
a like instead of staring at a blank
Hmm.
page, you have something to work off
Hmm.
of. And I think that that's where it will really be
Hmm.
helpful. Like recording transactions, I
Hmm.
think it can do a lot of those.
Hmm.
But
Right.
here's the thing. And there are ways to solve this, but if you go
Hmm.
to Amazon and you buy something,
Hmm.
you could buy a million different things, all
Hmm.
which may get classified slightly differently.
Hmm.
Now,
Right.
AI won't necessarily know that unless
Hmm.
there's additional information,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
there's components of it that
Hmm.
it lacks. Now, those are probably solvable over
Hmm.
time. But I think that the interaction point of the strategic pieces of that is not that
Hmm.
it won't ever get there, but I
Hmm.
think that's a longer runway of sort of being
Right.
able to sort of like be involved in
Hmm.
that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it can easily, obviously, do 2 plus 2.
Yes.
But the human touch is hey, I've heard about a new version of a small business loan that might apply to you. Now, could you get it if you type the prompts in right? Maybe, maybe not. And I think that's where it is still. We need the people, right? And yeah, I mean, AI is going to make a lot of things easier for us. Hopefully, it's going to do my social media posts. We'll see how this goes. Um, but yeah, to do that. Hey, what about type of things? I think, at least in the, probably long term, that still takes a person. And let's be honest, with your money, that's very important to have somebody who is saying, have you thought about, there's this that's going on. Hey, this doesn't quite make sense. All of those things. I think that's where we still need to be doing human to human.
Yeah, I think, where I find, so a little bit of background, my company, we really focus on helping small businesses and we
Mm-hmm,
we work
mm-hmm,
with the founders
mm-hmm.
usually from the trendy term right now is fractional CFO. You can
Right. Mm-hmm,
call it whatever you want.
mm-hmm,
The idea is about helping them make the best
mm-hmm,
decisions possible with the
mm-hmm.
data they have.
Right.
The thing that I think is most critical to that, and the thing we spend the most time on with our clients in that when we service them there is understanding what their North Star is, meaning
Right.
that
Mm-hmm,
why are you making the
mm-hmm,
decisions you're making?
mm-hmm,
And when we are faced with a decision, what is the thing that we
mm-hmm,
kind of have to
mm-hmm,
always reconcile back
mm-hmm,
to know that this is the
mm-hmm,
right decision or
mm-hmm,
the best decision for you?
mm-hmm.
And again, it's not that AI won't ever be able to do that, but that to me is really where if you can get it to do the basic stuff, then you're
Mm-hmm,
able to really
mm-hmm,
focus in on I'll say the value add
mm-hmm.
or the really important
Right.
pieces of the relationship to help them
Mm-hmm,
understand, okay, well, if you do this, this is what this is going to
mm-hmm,
mean. Or, oh, to your point, you want to do this. Now I'm cued in on to what sort of strategies or ideas
mm-hmm,
are in alignment with
mm-hmm,
that particular thing to better get you
mm-hmm.
there faster, right?
Right.
And that's the piece where
Mm-hmm,
we talk about like why is accounting important?
mm-hmm,
It's not just because the numbers need to be
mm-hmm,
accurate. That's important.
mm-hmm,
It's what are we doing with the
mm-hmm.
numbers? That is the most important thing.
Right.
I
Mm-hmm,
could you could have the best bookkeeper in the world. You could have all the right numbers,
mm-hmm,
and if that's as far as it went,
mm-hmm,
great, but you're not
mm-hmm,
getting real value out of
mm-hmm.
it, right? Like
Right.
the value in the data is being able to use the data for
Mm-hmm,
valuable purposes.
mm-hmm,
And I think you have to have both of those, but
mm-hmm,
having one isn't sufficient,
mm-hmm,
right? You can't, a lot of people come and they say, oh, I want help with this. Okay, but you
mm-hmm,
have bad data.
mm-hmm.
Or they say, I just
Yeah.
want
Two
this.
plus two
Okay,
didn't make four.
yeah. Yeah. And it's the balancing of that to really get the
Mm-hmm,
outcomes we want. And that to me is tying it all back, we talk about
mm-hmm,
relationships with that.
mm-hmm,
Like you want to have successful like conversations like that, then the relationship you have with your numbers person,
mm-hmm,
CPA, finance,
mm-hmm,
tax, whoever that is to you, it has to be an actual
mm-hmm.
relationship. You
Right.
have to know them, they
Mm-hmm,
have to know
mm-hmm,
you. You have to engage with them
mm-hmm,
outside of once
mm-hmm,
per year when your
mm-hmm,
taxes are due.
mm-hmm,
It has to be an actual
mm-hmm,
relationship to both of you
mm-hmm.
for it to be successful.
Right. Right. And it is those nuances. I see on your website that you work a lot with families. And you know, someone who is just, hired to do the job or AI or whatever, they're going to say, tell us what your long-term goals are. And the person's going to say, I want to make $1 million by X date. And that's great. You can read their body language as you ask them to see, okay, maybe they deferred to somebody else in the room when you ask that question. So they might have more data, or might be that person's thinking, we can't ever make $1,000,000. So then you need to find out why that's going to happen. And it is all those nuances that go into this that are successful for that planning. And so it comes back to exactly what you said. It's that relationship.
Yeah, it's the example you just gave is it's so eerie because it's one of the ones I see the most, which is, oh, what is it that you want? And it's,
Mhm.
oh, I want to make $1,000,000.
Right.
And it's almost always that exact statement, to be frank with you. For
Right.
most people, it's like, oh, I want to make
Mhm.
$1,000,000.
Mhm.
And the next words out of my mouth every time are why?
Mhm. Because
Because
it's what everybody does.
fundamentally, like, you may think that the number is that
Mhm.
you need $1,000,000, but what if it's only 700,000?
Mhm. Right.
And so we have to get to the core of that. We
Mhm.
have to understand, like, what are your values and
Mhm.
how do you hold them
Mhm.
relative to what we're trying to
Mhm.
achieve? And that piece there is, those are the things that
Mhm.
ultimately, frankly, in my opinion,
Mhm.
decide whether you get there or not.
Right.
Because you can always make decisions based on data, but are you weighting them against your
Mhm. Mhm.
personal wants, your
Right.
personal desires?
Mhm.
We could present the same situation to five different people,
Mhm.
and based upon their situations
Mhm.
and their goals and their outlooks on life and their opinions,
Mhm.
the way they come to the
Mhm.
conclusion and the conclusion itself are going to be
Mhm.
entirely different, most likely.
Right. Right.
And if it's a one size fits all, or if it's just a black and white sort of analysis, I think you lose a lot of value in terms of being able to
Mhm.
get the best outcome for
Mhm.
yourself. It really, as cheesy as it sounds, like, it's to me, it's really important to have a conversation, or be able to have a conversation with someone who understands you, who cares about you,
Mhm.
hopefully, and is interested in not just what you say, but why you say it. I tell people that I'm an accountant, but my main job is translating.
Right.
Like, my
And it
my
comes back
main
to
thing.
what you said your major
Yeah.
was originally when you went to college.
Yeah. And again, some of that is like, that's what I like, right? And so
Mhm.
I'm predisposed to that. But
Mhm.
I do believe that that is my job.
Mhm.
It is reading body language. It
Mhm.
is seeing how someone reacts
Mhm.
to the way I ask a question. It is understanding and looking at, to think, are you holding something back?
Mhm.
And why are you holding it
Mhm.
back? And what can I do to make you feel comfortable to share that? Because that
Right.
may be the thing that unlocks
Mhm.
all of this.
Right.
And
Yeah. You ask them that and they cross their arms and lean back. Okay.
yeah,
That means they're not wanting to share with you, or you made them uncomfortable with that question or whatever.
yeah, yeah. And so those conversations are really important,
Mhm.
but you got to have data to be able to get to those conversations,
Right.
right? You have to have information. And what I tell people all the time is, I don't actually, maybe it's not that I don't care, but it's that I'm not offended if you don't choose the recommendation I give you.
Mhm.
If I
Right.
if we talk through the data and I
Mhm.
go, look, this is what the data says you should
Mhm.
do,
Mhm.
and you go, that's great, Nolan, I want to do this.
Mhm.
That is totally
Mhm.
fine by me. In fact, I
Mhm.
appreciate it.
Right.
But what I can't have happen is you make that decision
Mhm.
without knowing
Mhm.
that the data underlying it says something entirely different, right?
Right.
One is a conscious versus an
Mhm.
unconscious decision. And it's my responsibility to make sure you
Mhm.
know what it is that you're looking at and what that means, so that you can make the right decision through your own optics of how things
Right.
play out, and against your own beliefs and against your own desires and goals.
Mhm.
Because the data is the data, but how it gets applied to each situation kind of changes.
Mhm. Right. Well, and it is about all those other factors. Somebody might say, "Yeah, I want to make $1,000,000." Well, you might know they don't have the capacity to do that. They would need to hire up. They would need more building space, whatever.
Yeah.
I have that conversation when I'm talking with people about marketing. I remember one time I had a client who they had a hair salon, and they wanted to get more people in to get their hair done, right? That's kind of the goal. And so we came up with this really cool campaign, and it was fun. It actually won awards. It was really a cool campaign. But the the discussion we had was what it was going to be, right? So what was the offer? And then it was did they have the bandwidth to be able to do that? And so, this was back when you actually still bought zip codes, and this was a direct mail piece. But same thing happens with anything now. And so they had said, okay, this is the area we want. We're going to mail it to here, and we're going to say 50% off. And I said, okay, that sounds really good. But if you get 20 people who call, can you handle 20 new clients? If you get 50 people who call, can you, and they, so then they kind of said, well, no, we can only do X number, and I said, because the worst thing, and especially because clearly we were targeting women, right? And the worst thing would be if they said, we're sorry, we don't have any space for you. We can't take your appointment, because women being women are then going to tell their friends, don't bother calling, because they don't have they can't take that appointment. So yeah, I mean, just because they said, hey, we want to get X number of new clients, did they have the structure in order to be able to do that? And most people don't stop and think about that. They just think, I want $1 million. I want 20 new clients. I want whatever it is, without figuring out, can we actually get from A to B?
100% couldn't agree with you more. We set goals, but then we never sort of fact check the goals to see,
right,
one, do they get us the outcome we want? And B, how do we actually make that happen, right? Sometimes, there's the old saying, less is more. I remember a situation where I had a client who came on, and they were doing about 600,000 a year in revenue. They were being successful and they were growing. And he came to me and he said what we talked about before. I go, what are you looking to accomplish? He goes, I want to make $1 million. I said, okay, why? And we went through the why question 5 or 6 times. And ultimately we got to a point where the answer he gave, and this was the real answer when we got there, was, I want to be able to go see my son baseball like a couple times a week. And so what we determined, once we knew that was what we were actually trying to accomplish, we reverse engineered what that had to look like to accomplish that.
Because if he worked too much, if his goal was too high, then he wasn't going to be able to do that.
And what we found is that the number he needed wasn't $1 million. It was like 750, somewhere around there. And what he had to do to get there was not as great as what he thought it was. But we would never have been able to do that if we didn't really understand what we were trying to solve for, and then work backwards to confirm that we get there. So often we actually start at the starting point and we go forward, but there's no guarantee that each step we make is going to get us to our goal. Conversely, if we start at the end point and we work backwards, well, we know that every step we take always ties back to where we want to be, because that's where we started. And so it's about mapping it backwards to know that what we've done along the way is going to guarantee the results we want. And that's oftentimes the piece that gets missed, but you can't do that ultimately, right? Unless you have the ability to fact check that with meaningful information.
Right. And you have to recognize, hey, things are going to happen along the way. And what happens if, those type of things. And that's where chatting about it is good. You might know, okay, well, this person, they've got a great second in command, so he can cut back his hours, or, oh my gosh, he's going to have to work 3 times as hard. So that's going to be, all of those things. And people scoff. They're like, ugh, I just want to make more money. Okay, you can probably make more money, but
at what cost?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And is that cost okay for you? Does the trade-off work? Like, my kids, well, I mean, like, kids hate me when I say this, but I always say to them, like, every decision you make has a consequence. Doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's good. Sometimes you never even know what the consequence is, but everything you do
eating your bowl of cereal, the consequence is you're not hungry.
Yeah. Like, everything has a trade-off, right? And so when you say, I want to make my dollars, and you go out to do that, you have to ask yourself, like, are you okay with the trade-offs you're making? And oftentimes as business leaders, we don't think about those, or we put other people's needs and benefits before our own. We're the last person to get paid. We're the last person to take time off. And when this comes back to why, when we work with people, I'm very interested in not just them, but the family, because we could build a great business for you, but if at the end of the day you go home and the family and you are not happy, what was it all for? Why were we here doing all of this? Like, it doesn't matter if at the end of the day it wasn't about getting you the results you wanted. And for most small businesses, the business and personal are so overlapped. I mean, that's a very closely aligned Venn diagram. Those are not Olympic circles, right? They
Right.
are very much over the top of each other. And so it's critical to really understand all of those pieces and reconcile them back to each other.
Right. And the goals have to be achievable too. In marketing, we call them BHAGs, big,
Mm,
hairy,
very,
audacious goals, right?
yeah.
And I hate those because those are the goals that are virtually unattainable. They're if everything goes exactly right,
Yeah.
we can get that goal. Well, then if that's the only thing you're focused on, everything else might be a failure, right? You might still be very successful, but that big goal was 5 million. You might make 1 million. You might make 500,000 and be perfectly fine. But you're thinking, no, my goal was 5 million. So it's important to kind of think those things through too. What is a realistic goal? Now you don't want to set it too short,
Right.
but
Yeah.
you want it to be something that is going to work.
Yeah. I mean, goals are important because they need to be aspirational and they need to be authentic. It doesn't work if, people set goals that aren't their own. They're what they think other people want their goals should be, right? They're not true to themselves.
Right.
But to your point, I see a lot of times too that people are afraid to set the goal they want out of fear of not reaching it.
Right.
And they I don't want to say they're incapable of handling that. It's hard. Look, as business owners, sometimes it's a very lonely world we live in. And when you put out something and you say to yourself or to your team or your company or the world that I'm going to triple revenue or whatever your goal is for the year, and you don't do it, it's hard not to take that one completely on the chin.
Right.
It's hard not to feel as though that's your failure to own completely. But to your point, there were probably gains. There are probably more gains than you realize. And a failure is only a failure if you fail to learn from it. And so
Right.
if you only 2.5x'd it, well, maybe you didn't hit your goal, but you didn't fail. You maybe fell a
Right.
little short, but there were still gains there and there was still growth. Yeah, it's unfortunate when I see people sort of, I'll say, sandbag their goals. They just sort of like and as a result, they wonder why they never progress. And it's like, well, you're not really aspiring
Right.
to do anything great, right? Like you're going to kind of rise or fall to whatever it is around you. And so if that's as much as you're challenging yourself, then the reality is you probably have a hard time pushing through that.
Right. Well, and I'm assuming that because I fall under this category, right? That in many cases, we don't even set those goals. We're just going along, just doing what we've always done, and never really thinking about, okay, what are my long-term goals? What's my goal for next year? I mean, whatever it is, because we're just as happy as can be to keep going merrily along and not realizing, okay, maybe I do need to have goals.
I think you would, well, maybe you wouldn't be, but I would say most people are surprised how few people actually know what their goals are. So when we sit down, again, one of the first things we ask is, what are we trying to solve for? What is your goal? What is the end result you want? And sometimes they have an answer, but whether they have an answer, if they do, it's rarely the answer that is the end answer. And so it's not that it's wrong, it's just not authentic. It's not fully formed. And the reason that's the case, the reason so rarely someone comes in with a clear identity as to what they want, in my opinion, is because we don't ever really give ourselves the permission to think about what we want.
Right.
So much of society views that as selfish or
Right.
as
Greedy.
or greedy. And somehow being selfish has become a bad thing. It can be, but anything can be a bad thing to an extreme. Being benevolent can be unhealthy to an extreme. And so there's nothing wrong sometimes with being selfish. There's nothing wrong with wanting something for yourself. And yet, as business leaders, we often, as I said before, we deprioritize our wants and our needs.
Right.
And unfortunately, the result of that, right, is you kind of become aimless. You're a boat in the ocean without something to point to on the horizon. And this is how months, years can go by without really feeling as though you've made progress or reaching your potential.
Right.
And it's often
And
because
you might have been paying the bills, doing all of those things, but you never kind of went to that next level.
we get comfortable is often what happens, right? We settle into a place like, oh, this isn't bad. And then we sort of sit there and then look, there's nothing wrong with that fundamentally.
Right.
If you're
And
happy
for some
there,
people, that's what they want,
yeah,
right?
that's
I
like,
don't
I'm not
want,
suggesting where you're at is not where you should be, but rather what we see is that people kind of stop trying. There's this thing called the rule of 3 and 10. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
No.
it's this idea that it's not mine. I wish it was. But it's this idea that as businesses grow in increments of 1 to 3 and 3 to 10 and 10 to 30 and so on, and this could be revenue or people or whatever the case may be, usually revenue though, is that the thing that got them to the last milestone is the thing that will prevent them from reaching the next one. And the reason for that is, so say you're a $300,000 business in revenue, and you're trying to reach 1 million. You might be able to get to 500,000, 600,000, but you'll never reach 1 million unless you change who you are and act as $1 million business, right? Because the thing that got you to 300,000 is the thing that keeps you as a $300,000 business. And it's the same thing that will prevent you from moving ahead. And unless as a business owner and a leader, we identify what those barriers are and we consciously work on augmenting them and improving them to be the next version, we can't get through past that. And so the reason I say this is because most often when people come to us, the thing they are asking for help on that they don't always realize is that they're at a revenue point and they don't know how to get to the next one.
How
They've
do
tried
they take that
everything
next
else.
step?
They've tried marketing, they've tried sales, they've tried all these things, and they're like, well, let's ask the accountant. Maybe he knows why I can't get this number. And it's not that I know, it's that I can help them understand so that they can reframe their situation. And that's oftentimes not all it is, but that's a huge component of it. It's, well, why are you doing it this way? Well, that's how
we've always done it that way.
That's exactly right. But you've always only been a $2.2 million business. You just told me you wanted to be a 3. So do you know what it looks like to be a $3 million business? Okay, well, now let's answer that question. And we work on identifying what that means from a scale, economic, financial standpoint. So they actually understand. Going back to your point about you want more clients. Great. Can you support those clients? Like if tomorrow I gave you 100 new clients, more often than not, your business would fail immediately because you don't have the infrastructure to do that. And so you can go out and hire the best marketer in the world, but if you're not prepared for the results they can bring you, you're going to fail. And that's sometimes, to your point, worse than never having the clients because the public perception of you not meeting expectations can haunt you for a long time. And so that's what we work on with them. And I think this, and I'm not trying to self-preach here, but this is, I think, a really important thing that gets missed in all of this is like, why am I not where I want to be? How do I get better? Where are the things I need to focus on? Well, we have to identify the things that are how they're operating. And we have to then identify, we have to get really clear on where you want to get to. It's a little like opening Google Maps. There are two things it asks you, right? Where are you? Where do you want to
go? Yep.
And then its job is to give you the path in between. And you inform it like, well, I don't want to take tolls or can we not take highways? But its job is to use that information to help you with that. That's the same thing. And that's what someone in my role or whoever you're working with, that's their role for you. And that's how you should work with them is you've got to give them the endpoints and then you've got to help them frame up how to answer the path in between so that it gets you there the right way.
Right. Yeah. And as you said, it's, it's all of those things. Like somebody might say, I have to be done by 3:00 every day because I have to pick my child up from school. Okay. That's a great data point to be able to know that. Or they're going to say, I can work 2 hours every evening. I have no problem, whatever it is, but they have to come to terms with that, and figure that out. It was funny. I was in a mastermind just yesterday, and it's the Women's Success Accelerator. And I love this group that I'm in. And we were talking about planning for 2025. And I found it very interesting because we're all of a certain age. And each one of us was building into next year downtime. And, like one person said, I don't want to work more than 3 days a week. And we all went, woo, and she said, and I don't want to work past 5 p.m. She said, normally I work 6 days a week, 10-hour days. And so then the question was, okay, well, what are you going to do? Okay, you can't just keep going the way you've been, because it's not, obviously that's not going to work, or it would have. And so then, it was okay. You need either more clients, or right, or you need to charge more, or a combination of, and it was interesting because she had thought about all that, and so it was a really interesting discussion. But yeah, I mean, it was her goal was to work less.
Yeah.
And and I think we really did. We went, ooh, and then we all went, oh, we want to do that. And like, I can work wherever I have internet, right? So I
Yep.
can I can be wherever, and that works. But that doesn't mean that I want to be working when I'm on vacation, or doing all of those things. And but I think so many times, especially as a business owner, we think we have to. We think we have to be spending the most time. What example would I be setting if I worked less hours than everybody else? All of those various things. And well, maybe the example you're setting is that families take priority, and then everybody will work to make sure that happens for everybody. And so it's interesting conversations to have with people.
Guilty as charged in what you've just described at full spectrum, right? There have been points where I have said to myself, or at least thought to myself,
Mhm.
well, I have to work that hard, because
Mhm.
if not, what will they think of me?
Right.
What is the
If I'm not
precedent
the
I'm
first
setting?
person in the office and the last person to leave.
Yeah. And what is funny is that the same is true for the clients we work with.
Mhm.
And this has been something I've gotten better at as I've gotten older,
Mhm.
which is, if you're going to talk about
Mhm.
family and all that, then
Mhm.
guess what? My family is also the most important thing in my
Mhm.
life. And
Mhm.
so there are boundaries that have to be
Right.
set. And it's very like, your point about I can work anywhere I want to, but
Mhm.
that doesn't mean I want to
Mhm.
work everywhere I
Mhm.
can.
Right.
And so, sometimes I do choose to work when I'm on vacation
Mhm.
because something comes to me and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I want to put that down and
Mhm.
so forth. But that's
Mhm.
my choice.
Right.
I don't want
Mhm.
it to be an obligation.
Mhm.
And that's what we really want from our clients,
Mhm.
is because when you ask them, there's like two or three things that everyone says they want when you
Mhm.
distill it down to one word.
Mhm.
The first one is freedom.
Mhm.
Right? They want freedom. And freedom from what is the
Right.
sort of
Mhm.
defining piece of
Mhm.
that, right? And the other one is legacy.
Mhm.
They want to leave. What is the
Mhm.
legacy they're going to leave behind
Right.
for them, for their family,
Mhm.
for generations?
Mhm.
And then the third one that comes up is, how are we going to steward both of those
Mhm.
into
Mhm.
action, right? So
Mhm.
what are the things that we're going to do to
Mhm.
ensure those happen?
Mhm.
And it is about, we have to we as a company, my company, we try to be very conscious about not doing it for the sake of projecting, but
Mhm.
also we want to live the values we preach.
Right. Mhm.
And so if we're going to talk about this, then we
Mhm.
want to mimic those back to our clients.
Mhm.
And so we, and our team, like we take a fair amount of time off. Like
Mhm.
around Christmas time, we will take
Mhm.
the last 2.5 weeks off of the
Mhm.
year because frankly, we can and we
Mhm.
want to. And it's
Mhm.
important for our team to sort of have that time with
Mhm.
their families. One, January is busy for us.
Mhm.
But but two,
And then it ramps up from
and
there.
then it ramps up, right? But but it's, why not, right?
Mhm.
Like why not? And
Mhm.
part of it is too. I've had a client who once said, well, what if I have something really important? It's like, okay, well, let's solve the question of,
Mhm.
how do we have that really important
Mhm.
thing happen at a different time?
Right.
Why does it have to
Mhm.
happen now? Like,
Mhm.
don't just solve the
Mhm.
symptom, solve
Mhm.
the disease. Like,
Mhm.
let's get to the root of the
Right.
problem so
Mhm.
that it doesn't just
Mhm.
continue to repeat
Mhm.
itself, right? Like,
Mhm.
you, like the issue is not, oh, I don't know what I owe in taxes. The issue is like, how do we actually come to a conclusion so that we know that number when we need it,
Right. Mhm.
rather than finding out last minute? Or,
Yeah.
what do I
Mhm.
do about it? And all
Mhm.
these things that, like, we have to ask the right
Mhm.
questions to get to the right
Mhm.
solutions. Otherwise, we sort of just kind
Mhm.
of kicking the can around on
Mhm.
this stuff.
Right. And it is about knowing those things and setting those boundaries. I when I first started my business, people went, oh, well, you're working from home, therefore you can work 24/7. And I did for a little bit, right? And then
It's
I realized
dangerous.
this is bad, 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 bad. And so I told people my hours are here to here. And they didn't observe them because I didn't observe them. I would still respond to their email at 8 o'clock at night, or whatever it was. And so then, okay, I had the mind shift. Okay, don't do that. And then I figured out the way to really fix it. I told them I can work evenings and weekends and holidays, but it will cost you double. and they never had an emergency again, right?
Yeah.
Or they would go ahead and send it to me, but just know I wasn't going to respond until the next business day. But it was about setting those boundaries and then keeping them myself. I just sent a note out to my clients and I said, I'm going to be, traveling for the last 2 weeks of the year. I will still be working. However, things won't be quite as rapidly responded to as normal. So if it is something that is time critical, make sure you tell me. But one of my favorite guests, and I can never remember his name. I've got to figure out who it was. He told me he knew his business was a success when he went on vacation and didn't get a single call or email. In other words, he had great people that he had empowered to make those decisions, to not go, oh my God, Nolan, the coffee didn't get delivered today, what do we do? Because that if people never call with a true emergency, they in many cases they figure it out, but they call with the stupid little things. The coffee didn't get delivered, fine, then go to the store. You've got the company credit card, or we'll reimburse you. But but it is about empowering those folks. But again, that's where having those relationships, and you can say, who is your second in command? Who do you trust to be doing that? One of the things people said to me during COVID was, we don't trust that our people are when they're working from home.
Yeah.
And I said, well, first of all, are they getting the work done? Well, yeah. And I said, okay, so I don't see what the problem is. And I said, but more importantly, did you trust them to get the work done when they were in the office? And if that answer was yes, then more than likely it was going to continue, whether they were at that desk or at their home office. And if they said no, I said, well, then you got a totally different problem.
Right.
And it really was just kind of one of those things of people sitting down and figuring out, again, what are our priorities? How are we communicating it? And all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. It is true about the statement about he said he knew he had a great business when he didn't get those things. Right. I would add to that that was also what he was solving for. Right. So like that may not be the case for everyone, right? Like that may not be their ideal business, but for him it was. And that's he knew that was his metric of knowing he was successful. And that's a really important thing, right? Is to know, how are you measuring your success for you, not just someone.
Right. Well, it's funny. I always ask my guests for things that they want to talk about. And I've skipped some of the really obvious ones because we've been having this great conversation. But kind of the most obvious one is people don't want to work with accountants because you give us reports that we don't understand. Yes. Right. I mean, 100%. I'm working on a big nonprofit thing right now. I'm the person in charge, fabulous person who is my money person. Yeah. And she sends me these reports and I look at them and go, but I don't want to admit to her that I don't understand them. Right. So I just, okay, thank you so much. In just a couple minutes, how do we jump that hurdle?
So what you described is true for like 95% of people, which is there's an element of shame of maybe not understanding what we think we should know. It's not necessarily liking what we're getting or being. Right. What I would tell you is that when you, and this is hard for some people because they like the person they're working with, but it's a relationship. And so it has to be equitable from both ends. Right. The person you hire has to understand who you are, how you understand data, and be able to meet you at that point. Right. What I mean by that is, so one of the things that we work with, I said up front, like we try to make accounting not suck for people. Part of the way we do that is we go, how do you interpret information about your company? Right. For some people, it's a Loom video. For some people, it's narrative. For some people, it's financials. For some people, it's metrics. They're not wrong, but they're wrong for you if they're not how you view things, right? And so I hate to say this, but the reality is the answer to that question is you have to hire the right person who can meet you the way you need to. It's just like, when we date in the world and we find the right person, there's a lot of great people we date that are nice people, but we don't end up. But they're just not the right person. Because they're not right for us in that moment of our lives, at least, right? And so it doesn't discredit them. It doesn't mean they're bad. It's just they weren't the person for us. The same is true for professionals. There's a lot of brilliant people out there, but they may not be for you. Because they don't understand you. They can't meet you at the place. This is one of our tenets of our companies. We want to meet our client wherever they're at. So we don't talk down to them. We don't patronize them. Just because they don't understand something doesn't mean they're not an intelligent person. It's about understanding what they need to know to be best at what they're doing, which is leading their company. And so that's like, as silly as it sounds, as simple as that sounds, it is actually kind of that simple, which is you have to find someone that you're a good partner with and that you can work with in tandem who understands you.
Right. And it comes back to what we were saying, relationship and communications. I have to know, I can tell you, Nolan, I don't understand. And you're not going to say, right? Yeah. I don't know how people can sigh on emails, but I get those, right? And so instead of the sigh, it should be, what do you need me to do so that you can understand it? And sometimes it's just a matter of, oh, I didn't see that line, or all these various things. It's funny. I'm not a numbers person, but my minor in college, for some unknown reason, was actually accounting. Because I only had to take 2 classes and it kind of worked. I'm like debit, credit, and thank God the software came along that can do an awful lot of that stuff. Right. But yeah, we're not saying anybody's stupid or they're not understanding, but we as the business owner have got to ask, yes, I'm paying for either that service or that employee or whatever, and I better be getting what I want out of it.
Yeah, the probably the most important thing to take, not to take away from this call, but just to understand as the business leader or a founder of a business, I think, is there's something you're amazing at. Whatever your area of genius is, it is something that you are great at. And you need to find a way to spend as much of your time in that area as humanly possible. And all the other things, you need to find other people to do for you.
Right. Whatever it is.
And here's the thing is, just because someone else does it for you, and just because you can do it, doesn't mean you should be doing it. Right. There's a lot, like I can install a toilet. That doesn't mean I should go do it. It just like, that's not the best use of my time. It's probably not, like, I could make a mistake I'm not aware of. I only know what I know, like all these things. But choosing not to do it doesn't make me an idiot. It doesn't make me someone who doesn't know what I'm
smarter.
doing. You got to know your limitations, right? And hiring experts to do the things they're experts in is the same thing that you're probably selling to your clients. Yeah. You're telling them, like, look, you need to hire me because I know this better than you. Same thing is true for the people you need to hire. Right. Find someone who understands you. Find someone that gets you. Find someone that you can work with, who understands what you're trying to accomplish, and let them be the best at what they do, so you can be the best at what you do.
Right. I tell people, I go on the 15-minute rule. If I can do whatever it is in 15 minutes, then I'll just do it. And I'm really bad at delegating, right? Because sometimes I can actually do it faster than telling somebody else to do it, or how to do it. But yeah, if it's not what I should be focusing on, and it's going to take me more than 15 minutes, then I have somebody else do it. Even if it's something I like, enjoy, can do, all of those things, if it's not what I should be spending my time on, then I need to give them the opportunity to shine by having them do it.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Well, oh my gosh, Nolan, this is, I'm loving that we're having this conversation at the start of the year, because I think it's a very good way for people to be thinking, how am I going to plan for 2025? And like we said, it's never too late to start, but you start as early as you can. But if somebody said, help, we need Nolan, how do they find you, and what are the services that you provide?
Yeah, so you can find us. Our website is bradfieldco.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Nolan-Bradbury. I'm not on the other social media points. I'm not
good for you.
Social media person. That's just not my thing. So if you see me there, that's not me, I guess. Spoiler alert. As far as what we do, so you've probably gathered our focus is, it's in accounting. It's in that realm. But we come at it, that's like our tool, but that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to help founders and business owners get the lifestyle that they want out of their business. And so we meet them wherever they're at. We solve their problems. Sometimes that requires us to do some bookkeeping, because the data is what's holding them back. So we have part of our business that does the bookkeeping for people. But ultimately, our bread and butter is really helping people use the information to the best possible way to be successful, with the hopes that down the road, that they are able to benefit personally outside the business from all those investments.
I love it. I love it. Well, this and obviously you can work virtually.
Yes.
That's one of the best things that's technology, right?
Yeah.
We can now work with people basically around the world. And
Most of my clients are not in my state, ironically
yeah,
enough.
yeah, which is a gorgeous state. It is Washington. But it's just kind of one of those things. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all about those relationships.
Yep.
And this has been a great discussion. I'd love to continue it because I think there is so much more that we can help people kind of demystify things. And I'll be honest, it's totally self-serving because I am the person that looks at the P&L and goes, huh. I go to the very last line. Is there still
alone.
Money? Cool.
Yep, you're not alone. Most people look first, right?
Yep.
Yep.
But yeah, but until we have another opportunity to chat, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
I think the thing I'll emphasize some of the key points I shared throughout this, which is if you feel as though you're ignoring the accounting or you're not getting out of the accounting what you feel you could be, there's a better way to do it. And it doesn't mean you need to hire someone else, but it does mean you need to sort of invest in that area of your business. And it can generate positive cash flow. It isn't just a cost center. It can be something that drives value to your business, just like sales and marketing more intuitively does. But to do that, you have to be working with the right person. It has to be viewed as a relationship, and it has to be something where you're equally engaged in understanding the value of what you're working on. Otherwise, it's going to be like anything else. You're going to ignore it, and it's going to become a back burner thing that isn't a priority to you.
I love it. Well, I've been having such an interesting and fun discussion, talking accounting, yes, with Nolan Bradbury, the founder of Bradfield Accounting and Advisory. I'm Deb Creer, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.